Welcome everyone to the Roy Adit channel, which, by the way, beautifully translates to Traces of the Past. I am absolutely thrilled to have you hanging out with us today. Real quick, before we jump into things, please take just a second to hit that like button, share this explainer with a friend, and drop a comment below to let me know you're watching. Your support is exactly what helps us keep bringing these fascinating stories to life. All right, today we are exploring the life and the mind of a guy whose very name is basically a synonym for genius. We're talking about Albert Einstein, the man who literally changed space and time. Okay, let's dive right into this. I want you to think about your own daily life for a second. Have you ever noticed how time just kind of seems to play tricks on us? Imagine you're hanging out with your best friends, you're laughing, having the absolute time of your life. An entire hour can flash by in what feels like a single minute. But if you're waiting in a frustratingly long line or sitting in a super boring meeting, man, just 1 minute can drag on and feel like an eternity. We all experience this, right? Well, for a really long time, humanity just thought this was a quirky psychological feeling. But Albert Einstein, yep, that iconic guy with the wild frizzy hair, stepped up and proved that this feeling isn't just in our heads. It is a fundamental scientific reality. So, Section 1, the dreaming scientist and an adventure of the mind. To truly understand Einstein, we really have to look past the intimidating chalkboards and realize that he was, at his very core, an explorer. But his spaceship wasn't made of metal, you know? His spaceship was pure imagination. When Einstein was just 16 years old, an age where most of us are literally just worrying about passing our exams, he embarked on his first great thought experiment. He asked himself this spectacularly weird and wonderful question. What would I see if I chased a beam of light, moving at the exact same speed as that light? By simply closing his eyes and visualizing this totally mind-bending scenario, he planted the seeds for a massive revolution in physics, showing us that the universe is not as simple or as rigid as we once believed. Which brings us to Section 2. 1905, the miracle year, rewriting physics. Now, at this point in his life, Einstein wasn't some esteemed professor at a fancy university. Not at all. He was just a simple, everyday patent clerk. He literally just sat at a desk all day, reviewing other people's inventions. But inside his head, a total storm of creativity was brewing. In that single year, 1905, which scientists literally now refer to as the miracle year, this humble patent clerk published 4 distinctly different, tremendously groundbreaking research papers. I mean, any single one of these papers would have been enough to secure a scientist's legacy forever. But Einstein published 4, and together, the whole shebang completely changed the world as we know it. The most famous result of this miracle year is special relativity. Now, I know special relativity sounds incredibly complex, but let's break it down simply. Einstein's wild imagination proved that time is flexible. It's not just this steady, ticking clock that is exactly the same everywhere in the universe. Instead, time can actually stretch out or shrink down, depending entirely on how fast you are moving. So going back to our earlier example, time really is relative. And then, of course, we have E equals mc squared. This is arguably the absolute most famous equation in human history. But what does it actually tell us? Well, it proves that mass and energy are deeply, deeply connected. In fact, a tiny, seemingly insignificant amount of mass can be transformed into a massive, unimaginably huge amount of energy. This simple, elegant little formula literally unlocked the hidden power of the entire universe. Moving right along, we reach Section 3, bending reality and the fabric of the universe. Now, you'd think after rewriting the rules of time and energy, a person might, take a break? Not Einstein. He immediately set off to completely redefine how we understand gravity and the very shape of the cosmos itself. But before we look at exactly how he did it, we have to look at his guiding philosophy. Imagination is more important than knowledge. Now, this isn't just some inspiring poster you see hanging in a classroom. This was his actual, literal scientific method. Visualizing the universe in his mind, picturing shapes and movements and light, that was the true key to his greatest discoveries. He didn't start with the math, he started with the vision. So the absolutely crucial point here is how he visualized gravity. Before Einstein, we basically just thought of gravity as an invisible string pulling things together, but Einstein, he imagined space and time as a fabric. Think of a really soft, stretched out rubber sheet. Now imagine placing a heavy iron ball right in the middle of it. What happens? Well, the heavy ball sinks, curving the rubber sheet down around it. That is exactly what massive objects, like our sun, do to the fabric of space-time. They curve it. And smaller objects, like the Earth, are just rolling along those curves. It's just an absolutely beautiful way to picture our reality. Which leads us to Section 4, Illuminating the Modern World and the True Nobel Prize. It's pretty easy to get lost in these grand cosmic ideas, but let's pivot away from abstract space for a second and look at your everyday life, because Einstein's theories are actively powering the modern world we live in today. Okay, here is a massive historical misconception for you. If you ask most people what Einstein won his Nobel Prize for, they will confidently tell you it was for relativity. But they'd be totally wrong. He actually won his Nobel Prize for his groundbreaking discoveries about light, specifically something called the photoelectric effect. And this brilliantly illustrates the bridge between his super high-level theoretical physics and the everyday technology you hold in your hands right now. He discovered how light can actually knock electrons loose from materials, creating an electrical current. It sounds like intense theory, but it is the exact foundation for technologies you rely on, from the moment you wake up to the moment you go to sleep. Take a look at this list right here. Solar panels, which are increasingly powering our homes and our cities, rely entirely on the photoelectric effect to turn sunlight into electricity. And the device you might be watching this very explainer on, the digital camera sensors inside your smartphone, exist directly because of Einstein's discoveries about light. His imagination from over a century ago literally built the screens and cameras of our present day. How crazy is that? Finally, we arrive at Section 5, a legacy of peace and the human beyond the science. As we move to the final chapter of his life, it's really vital to remember that Einstein wasn't just a brain in a jar. He was a deeply empathetic person living through some of the absolute most turbulent times in human history. For his final great adventure, he stepped completely out of the laboratory. In his later years, Einstein became a staunch and fierce advocate for world peace. Having seen the devastating potential of what science could unleash, partly, through the realization of his own equations, he stood actively and vocally against violence. He campaigned tirelessly against the creation and use of nuclear weapons, basically begging humanity to use its intelligence for survival and harmony rather than destruction. Which brings us to the end of our journey today, and I really want to leave you with this final provocative thought. Einstein proved that visualizing the impossible is the very first step to making it a reality. His imagination changed the fundamental fabric of how we understand our universe. So I ask you, how is your imagination going to change the world? Never, ever underestimate the power of your own mind. Thank you so much for joining me on the Roy Adiat channel. If you enjoyed this Explain It today, please make sure to subscribe, leave a comment with your biggest takeaway, and definitely tune in for our next episode. See you next time.